time to switch gears. On the same line of inclusion for all, no matter the ability level, technology is helping to change and enhance the world that we live in. At No Barriers, we have the privilege of knowing some of the most amazing innovators working in the world of adaptable and accessible technology. One of those inspiring innovators is none other than rock climber, engineer, biophysicist, and No Barriers ambassador Hugh Herr. Just a bit about Hugh. In 1982, while climbing Mount Washington out east, Hugh was caught in a blizzard for 3 nights at -20-degree temperatures. He suffered severe frostbite, and both of Hugh's legs had to be amputated below the knees. But in true No Barriers fashion, when others saw loss, Hugh saw a blank canvas and went on to become one of the most respected innovators in the entire world. Following months of surgeries and rehab, Hugh was doing what doctors told him was unthinkable. He was climbing again. He designed specialized prostheses, including feet with high toe stiffness that are titanium spiked to assist in climbing steep walls. Hugh's now a professor at MIT and focuses on creating lifelike bionic limbs. He's also been coined the leader of the bionic age by Time magazine. Hugh's here today to share a bit about himself and what he's currently working on. Let's head over to Hugh.
Thank you, Dave, for your wonderful introduction. Hi, my name is Hugh Herr, as stated in the intro. Today, I'll be talking about the emerging field of bionics. So what is bionics? Bionics is this glorious integration of biology or interaction between biology and design. It's a two-way arrow. So often in bionics, we ask the question, how does the human body work? And we extract scientific principles and they inform the design of, for example, exoskeletons or prostheses or various interventions. And sometimes design informs biology. Sometimes we actually redesign the biological body for improved function. So how did I get into the business of bionics? In 1982, I was in a mountain climbing accident and suffered frostbite below the knee. And both of my legs had to be amputated due to tissue damage from frostbite around March timeframe of 1982. So I woke up one day with a very different body and I asked, what's next? And as a young man, I dreamed of returning to my chosen sport of mountain climbing. I was successful in doing that. And what I was able to do is adapt my prostheses to various extreme environments. So here you see me at a very, very tall stature, able to reach hand and foot holds that most human beings are not able to reach. I also developed various fixtures and prosthetic feet that would enable me to stand on small rock edges the width of a coin, feet that would penetrate ice surfaces and so on. So as a young man, through this innovative process, I was actually able to climb at a more advanced level with artificial limbs than I had ever achieved before the accident with normal biological limbs. And this was very inspiring to me because I realized the power of technology to heal, rehabilitate, in my own case, to actually extend human capability, human physiological function beyond innate capacities. Today, I'm an MIT professor in this scientific and technological journey. This is an image of the legs that I'm wearing. Each leg has 3 small computers, the size of your thumbnail. Each leg has 12 sensors and a muscle tendon-like actuators, and they allow me to walk at normal levels of biomechanical function in terms of stiffness and positions and powers. Today, I'm part of a Center for Bionics at MIT with my various colleagues. In my lectures and comments today, I'll talk about some of the work we're doing at the center. So we're actually integrating various diverse fields, genetics, tissue engineering, robotics, machine learning, and so on, to create new bodies. One of the area of interest is paralysis. So here you see a wheelchair on the left and a lady on the right who has a spinal cord injury, who has what's called an exoskeleton that has various motors that are computer controlled. that move her impaired limbs. Now, our vision of the future is that the technology for the treatment of something like spinal cord injury will go onto the body and even inside the body and will become, in fact, small and invisible. So we envision what we call a digital nervous system architecture. Here, sensors will be put inside the muscle to measure muscle length and speed, kind of an artificial proprioception. These data will go to a computer that sits on the surface of the skin that informs optical stimulations of muscle to restore natural movements. So you can imagine a series of electronic buttons that communicate through the skin to wiring to various nerves and muscles that orchestrate what we now, the field is now understanding more deeply of how motor control works. For example, how walking works across smooth and irregular terrain surfaces. So basically on computer chip, we would orchestrate the fundamental reflexes of walking, for example, and be enabled to restore natural movements in the person that suffered a spinal cord injury. So how will we do that? There's various components. One component is optogenetics. So in optogenetics, the technique is to using a viral vector to deliver a light-sensitive protein to a nerve that innervates a muscle. So here you see in histology, the red markings indicate the light-sensitive protein. Here you see an animal where the protein has been expressed, the opsin has been expressed in the nerves that innervate the ankle flexor and extensor. And by shining light on the surface of the skin, we're able to control the joint or the muscles that actuate that joint with very high fidelity. So there's just noting there's nothing inside this animal. There's no implant. So by shining light on the skin, there's enough light that gets to the nerve that we can activate the muscles and control the joint. Now, obviously, in action or human applications, we would have some implants inside the body to close the loop, if you will, to restore movement. So what are the sensors that we would have inside the body? So we envision using what we call magnetomicrometry as a feedback signal for artificial muscle stimulation. So magnetomicrometry, there's small magnetic beads coated in biocompatible materials, and then an electronic board of magnetic sensors that detect the positions of those beads in space. Our algorithms are so sophisticated that we can even compensate for disturbances of the magnetic field caused by large metal objects, such as a wrench. So what we are planning to do here is inject these sensors into muscles and then apply engineering control strategies to restore desired positions and stiffnesses and joint torques, actually using the muscles of the body instead of external motors, such as in the case of an exoskeleton. So here we do a position control in the limb of the animal. So we have a desired change in position, and we can track that position by modulating the light that innervates the muscle. So here's an animation summarizing our vision. So here's a gentleman with a spinal cord injury that has paralysis. So we would essentially wire up the leg. There'd be sensors again inside the muscles. So here you see we would put the magnetic beads into the various muscles and then feed back those signals to a computer, and then the computer would modulate optical signals delivered to nerve cuffs to restore movement, such as walking. So here you see the full wiring and the feedback control designated by the moving lights up the wiring. So this is our view of where tech will go. We'll go for these bulky, often heavy exoskeletons to something that's integrated into human physiology. So next I'll talk about amputation, our work in amputation. So there's been a lot of work over the decades in making computer-controlled artificial limbs, such as I wear, the limbs that I described at the beginning of my lecture. These limbs allow persons with bilateral amputations, such as myself, to run up a rocky path. But so far, the bionic limbs, bionic legs do not integrate seamlessly with the nervous system. So that is our goal, and we think it's critical to actually change or redesign how limbs are amputated. There's not been a lot of innovation in limb amputation for a very long time. So to verify that, you see on the left, 1860, this is an anatomical surgical textbook around the US Civil War era, describing how limbs should be amputated at the below knee level. And on the right is a modern Netter textbook describing largely the same technique. So across such a vast span of time, there really hasn't been a fundamental change to standard clinical methods for limb amputation. Unfortunately, my limbs were amputated in 1982, as I stated, and I received this US Civil War era surgical technology. So what is that approach? So the conventional approach stitches down muscles at constant length. So when muscles fire, there's not an interaction between agonist and antagonist muscles, which inform the central brain on the position and loads on joints. So because of that, when my feet feel like they're fixed in space, and when I'm blindfolded, I have no idea where my feet are in space because I lack proprioception. So at MIT, we invented what we call the agonist-antagonist myoneural interface, or AMI for short. So an AMI comprises two linked muscles, an agonist linked to an antagonist, where they're linked at the time of surgery. When the agonist is electrically activated, it mechanically stretches the antagonist, and that sends biological sensing outputs to the central nervous system, which largely inform proprioception, or the sense of where our joints are in space and the loads on our joints. So the idea is in the residual limb to create these muscle pairs for each robotic degree of freedom on the prosthesis for which we want to develop a controller. So the idea is when a person thinks about moving their phantom limb, these small AMI muscles dynamically move, and we sense those movements with sensors, and then that informs in a master-slave control how the bionic limb is controlled. And when those muscles move, the biological sensors within the muscles and tendons inform the brain as to the position of the AMI muscles, and therefore the position of the external prosthesis, giving the person a natural sense of positions and loads. So we developed this scientifically at MIT, and at a certain point in our work, we felt confident to translate the technology into human use. My friend Jim Ewing, who is shown here, Jim and I have known each other for about 30 years. We have climbed together since we were young men. Jim was in a tragic climbing accident. He fell 50 feet and his rope failed to catch him, and he hit a very rocky ground surface. He broke many bones in his body. One leg in particular was so damaged that even after surgeries and rehabilitation, he still could not walk without excruciating pain. And he came to me crying and said, I'm thinking I would be better off if my limb were amputated. His timing was immaculate because we had just invented and preclinically evaluated the AMI amputation procedure. So my colleague, Dr. Matthew Cardia, a fantastic plastic surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, performed this first AMI procedure on Jim, our first human patient. And this animation describes what was done. So what are called synovial canals were repositioned on the tibia to create channels or pulleys to route the tendons to create two AMIs, one AMI for the bionic ankle joint and a second for the bionic subtalar joint for inversion-eversion control. So a hypothesis is after the surgery, Jim would be able to move and feel his bionic limb even when blindfolded. So here's Jim after the surgery. The black boxes are measuring his muscle electrical activations as are plotted on the right for each of the AMI muscles. He's moving his intact limb to communicate to us, the viewers, how he's moving his phantom limb. So what I want to underscore here is that the electrical signals to his muscles shown on the right have distinct patterns. You can easily see the differences between the muscles. And these signals are natural for swiveling the foot ankle, as is shown in the intact limb. When I do this exercise and I move my phantom limb, and if we look at my electrical signals to these muscles, they're all jumbled and you really can't see a difference between the muscles. But with Jim, there's a great deal of differentiation. We then hooked a bionic limb to his residuum and putting electrodes adjacent each muscle and developing a controller, Jim was able to mirror what he's doing on his unaffected side with the bionic movements on his affected side. So here, you know, in inversion and eversion and toes up, toes down, and so on. So that was pretty cool. But then Jim stood up, and what we saw was truly remarkable. So Jim stood up and started to go up and down slopes and steps. And what we witnessed that day was natural biomechanics mediated through his electromechanical bionic limb. So without Jim actually consciously trying to move the bionic limb moved in completely natural ways. So all of these subtle movements are involuntary. So we think because Jim's brain is receiving the proprioceptive information, Jim's brain knows exactly how to control his affected limb, even though the limb is made of titanium and aluminum and artificial materials. So here he's walking down and the bionic toe reaches to the next stair tread for shock attenuation. Again, from a different view. Again, Jim is not trying to do this. It's just completely natural, just like a person with intact limbs walking down steps. The legs do very complex movements that are involuntary. Jim also did very interesting things, like during the session, he got a roll of electrical tape stuck to his bionic sneaker. And instead of reaching down awkwardly to remove the tape, he shook it off, as you know, would be completely natural with a person with intact limbs. And when Jim sat down at the end of the session, he's a friend of mine, so we're chit-chatting about his family and so on. And he began naturally gesturing with his bionic limb, as if it was a natural limb. Remarkable. So here's where we ultimately want to go. We want to marry the magnetometry with the AMI amputation. And this animation describes that marriage of these two technologies. So with the AMI musculature, we'll implant these small magnetic beads, and then with the magnetometer electronic board on the outside socket, we'll be able to measure the length and speed of each AMI muscle and then communicate that to the robot in a master-slave relationship. So we think this merging of these technologies will enable incredible things like a person to stand on one leg and balance. We also want to apply this to the upper extremity. So here we'll create the AMI muscle constructs and implant the magnets. And then we believe we can have a very nuanced control of a bionic hand, even single-digit control at very fast speeds. So I'll finish up with neurological embodiment. So what we're marching towards is to connect the brain to electromechanics, to artificial computation, and artificial computation back into the brain. So this bidirectionality is what we seek, which I would describe as cyborg function. When we do that, what we're discovering is the person, when we bidirectionally link their nervous system to the prosthesis, they have a different relationship with the robot. They say things like, the robot became part of me, as if they have become embodied with the robot.
Really, literally within minutes of having it all connected, it starts becoming part of me.
So here again, we think this explains Jim just automatically, without thinking, moving his foot ankle to get the tape off his bionic sneaker. And it explains how he can just naturally gesture when he sits. There's an actual neurological embodiment with the bionics, which is very, very profound. So we decided to look into this. We did fMRI imaging of persons with intact limbs compared to persons with the AMI amputation, and furthermore, compared to persons with a traditional amputation. What we discovered in the part of the brain where you typically see proprioceptive activity for the foot-ankle complex, we don't see a difference in proprioceptive activity between a person with completely intact limbs and a person with the AMI amputation. It's as if the person with AMI amputation and the bionic limb the brain doesn't even realize the limb is missing, that the limb is synthetic. In distinction, persons with a standard amputation, such as I have, the level of proprioceptive activity is very different in the central brain. So I'll finish up with, back to my friend Jim Ewing. Like myself, after Jim's climbing accident, he dreamed of climbing again. So we built him a cyborg limb, a specialized rock climbing limb for the vertical world that would be fully controlled by Jim's nervous system. And then Jim returned to the area where his accident occurred, the Cayman Islands. And we went with him for his triumphant return to climbing. And we took this footage, which is utterly inspiring and wonderful. Thank you, No Barriers community, for your attention, and thank you for listening. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Hugh. It's absolutely amazing to see what technology can and is doing. I can't wait to see what else the future holds. Speaking of technology, another incredible innovation is the newest RV that Winnebago has been working on. Winnebago is our equity and adventure in the outdoors sponsor and has been creating accessible vehicles for years. Regardless of ability level, they want people to get out and enjoy the outdoors.
Between what we love and what we do. We are a family of brands with rich legacies that are as unique as our customers, but unified in how we work. We promise quality, delivered by empowered, passionate employees. We're part of a team caring for customers through a lifetime of experiences with us, and we purposely innovate to delight customers with new ways to travel, live, work, and play. We're dreamers, doers, and outdoor lovers who connect people more closely to the outdoors and each other.
I love that video. I love being in nature and going on outdoor adventures. I just got back from a 2-month trip in my RV with my family all around the US. After the year that we've had, nature is truly healing, and it's great being able to get out and adventure. Have you been able to travel this year, even locally? Drop your travel adventure locations in the chat. We want to see where all of our community members have been this year. If you haven't been able to get out, where would you like to go? Let us know. If you're still thinking about your pledge, maybe it could be to get out and travel more. Making your pledge online can help you accomplish that goal. Don't forget that when you make your No Barriers pledge online, we'll send you a virtual No Barriers flag that you can use as a reminder, continue to reach that pledge. And you'll also be entered to win one of 40 Airbnb coupons worth $500. That'll help get you moving. Huge thanks to Airbnb for being such a great member of our rope team.
Growing up, I had a serious love for music. And when I went to college, that's when I started really having problems with my hearing. And because of a connective tissue disorder that I have, I lost all of my residual hearing in 9 months and was dropped from the music program. And I lost myself in that. I felt like I'd fallen down a dark well and nothing really felt real anymore. I realized in so many different ways that I have two choices. I can stay here forever, or I can figure out a way to take one painful step at a time to the possibility of something different. The reality of life is that you will hit a wall, you will struggle, and the choices that you make in that struggle are so important. The people who you surround yourself by are so important. I had so many people who've pushed me along the way who have refused to give up on me and to see for yourself that what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. And if you allow that mentality to sink in, it will change your life. This time I'm gonna make it. I'm not the same kid I used to be.
When things tend to happen that are outside of our control, we tend to go to the place of like, we've lost everything, we don't have anything. And the one thing I've always said, I've learned through my own experiences in life, is you still have one thing, and that one thing is the choice. But how do you respond? Like, it's on you. At some point, you got to stop blaming the outside world. At some point, you got to stop pointing the finger at everyone else, and you got to look at yourself and say, what am I doing or what am I not doing? Because there's this space in between when the challenge happens and ultimately the outcome. There's a space, and the outcome is determined by what happens within this space. That's determined by you. This is a ritual. This is a routine. This is a mindset that every single day when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, I probably slept bad last night. I probably am waking up worried about what happened yesterday or how it's gonna, spill over into the day and tomorrow possibly. Forget all that. Right now in this moment, I'm going to prepare my mind. I'm going to strengthen it. I'm going to kind of put some armor around it and just prepare it for whatever this day is going to be. But it's going to start with me simply just saying to myself, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be in control. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to have faith. I'm going to believe. Like, that's literally the things that I say to myself.